Welcome, reanimated fans, to this week's episode. I am H.A. Conrad, coming to you from Brooklyn, as always, with my intrepid co-host on the other coast, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
I'm more undead than intrepid today, so...
You've been limping along for a couple months now, man.
I'm working on about, 30%. Let's say. It's better than 25.
What have you got on tap for this weekend? We're doing our Anna and the Apocalypse viewing this evening with a large group of people. It's been surprisingly popular. So
yeah, it's a good Christmas movie, I guess, to hang out with. I get it.
Yeah, it's a
Why
good
not?
time of year. So what surprised me a little bit was that a lot of these people are not necessarily zombie movie fans, but decided to join us. So we have like a fuller house than we were expecting. So it'll be good though.
Nice.
But you've been plagued by the plague or several plagues?
Been plagued. We have a lot of like holiday crap going on, like not crap, good things. All good things. End of school sort of performances and yada yada yada.
We had multiple parties yesterday. So one of which had a giant brass band, so that was fun. And it was unusual but very cool. But yeah, I'm a little bit drained, so I'm actually gonna take it easy hopefully for the remainder of the week. I'm sure there will be other stuff that pops up though. But psyched to be here talking with you today about some zombie stuff. We have a couple of news items, and then we're going to jump into our recap review of The Walking Dead Season 9, Episodes 9 and 10, which there's a lot going on. So
There is rather a lot.
But before we do that, let's jump into the news items. And one of the things which... we have not actually watched it, but Disney is coming out with a sequel to their Zombies musical teenage drama, in which there are two cheerleader zombies, I guess. So this is the sequel. It's coming out Valentine's Day. I don't know if I can ever bring myself to watch this. I don't know how you're feeling about this, Stuart, but I just don't know if I can do it.
Yeah, sorry. This is a hard pass.
Yeah. So, but it's still going. So I just thought it was worth noting that I guess Disney's corner of the zombie market is still going strong. But in other news, and this actually there was several articles about this, but a mortician who is part of a natural sort of burial consortium or company, I can't tell if this is just to try to get press for that, which is very likely, but came out with a lot of criticism about how the zombies look and are portrayed in The Walking Dead. And we'll throw a couple of the articles in the show notes, but basically some of the criticism is that they're too skinny, basically, that the wasting wouldn't happen quite as quickly, I guess.
She wants to see more bloating in the corpses.
Yeah.
Like when you see, dead roadkill, they will often have their legs pinwheeling out.
True. True.
And that makes sense to me. And then she also, she basically just a lot of nitpicky stuff about how corpses break down. And I feel like the show has tried to make efforts to make the zombies look like they are decomposing in their own fictional way, because it's a fictional story, you guys.
Right. And also, one argument I can make in terms of the show is that we just don't know the sort of effects that whatever this virus is, that it may have different effects on the body, which is probably one of the things that they'll respond to. But I will say, I feel like Nicotero and others have been very, if anything, I feel like they show multiple and different things in terms of the walkers, depending on their point of decomposition. We also don't know what the timeline is at this point. But I feel like, we had the well zombie, which everybody remembers. And we've had other things that have shown the bloat, depending on where and when they died. So I don't know. I feel like this is something to get some, and clearly it worked, to get some press for their company, which, I get it. But anyway, just thought it was a funny thing to be in there.
Yeah.
And then you had a couple other things that you wanted to chat about, and I admit I have not yet seen, but I've had a couple of people recommend at least the first of these shows. And the first is it's a Netflix only show, V
I
Wars.
I don't know if it's Netflix only, but that's where it is. That's where
Um,
it was thrown at me like, hey, you should watch this. So I took a look, and I've seen I think 7 episodes of V Wars so far, and it has an interesting cast. Not like mostly people I'm not familiar with, but
but it has that
they
main
seem good.
guy from that other vampire show, right? Ian Somerhalder or whatever his name is.
What other vampire show has he been in?
He was that. Oh gosh, it's that teenage vampire show, and it's not Twilight, but it was probably made because Twilight was popular, is my guess. Goodness. Gosh, now I'm gonna have to look it up.
Now we gotta look it up. Now we gotta look it up.
The Vampire Diaries.
Oh boy. Yeah, so he brought his eyebrows to this show.
I mean, they're very. Oh, but originally I knew this guy from Lost. He was Boone on Lost.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Lost alumni just showing
Pop
up
up.
in shows.
Like lots of supernatural shows, though he seems to have had a niche, I guess, with vampires. So he's kind of continuing that trend.
This show is it's vampires as a disease, and so it does play into our wheelhouse a little bit, but it is also then it gets into like society and right to live and government and not in, not necessarily in the ways that you and I like to usually delve into this stuff. So I'm not sure that it's something that we're going to watch or review, but I would encourage you to at least see a few episodes of it and let me know if you feel the same way or not. Itchy.
Well, I am familiar with the graphic novel that it's based upon, so I'm curious to see how close or how far it gets from that. The graphic novel is pretty good. So let me I'm happy to take a dive into it, and then maybe we can revisit it later.
Yeah.
And was there another show you wanted to chat about, or was that it?
Yeah, so Night Flyers, not zombie related at all, but it is space horror in the vein of Event Horizon.
Hmm.
In the vein of that sort of like psychological, you're in space, everything is terrifying. One of those sort of thriller slash horror shows. It's I think based on a short story or potentially a series by George R. R. Martin.
Hmm.
It was apparently first ran on Sci-Fi. One season was canceled in February of this year, but now it's on Netflix, which I don't know if that bodes. I don't think there's any news about it getting picked up or continued on Netflix. And honestly, it works pretty well as a one season show, just on how it ended. It's just it was pretty good. It was pretty darn good. It's got a great cast and interesting story, an interesting composition. So another one that I would recommend.
All right. Well, I will take a look at that. I don't know if I feel like we have talked about this, but I love The Expanse. I don't know if you've gotten into that, but in terms of like space sci-fi, I feel like it's still one of the better shows out there. There's moments when I'm not into it. It gets a bit soap opera-y, but it is kind of a space opera. So, that makes sense. But, I think if you got away from it, you should try it again.
The world building in that show is
Yeah,
just
it's still, I feel like it's one of my favorite, most successful sci-fi pieces. So,
I think I need to read the series.
yeah.
And another show that's coming out, which will probably feature some zombies, but we haven't seen any of the footage yet. Or at least I'll just say it: The Witcher with Superman is coming out
Yep.
December 20th, like in 5 days.
Yep.
And I think that show is going to be well. You know, I'm reading a lot of critical reviews that are like, "Wow, the action is great." We'll see. I mean, the source material is really good. I've played the video games; they're a lot of fun, and there are a lot of undead creatures in those games. So it might be something we get to talk about.
All right. Well, let's put a pause on that and see what happens.
Cool.
But without further ado, I think we're ready to. Today we're talking about episodes 9 and 10 of The Walking Dead season 9, Adaptation and Omega, and this was the season finale, and then mid-season finale, and then the mid-season premiere, I suppose. Correct?
Are we sure?
No, maybe not.
Episode 9 should be the mid-season premiere.
No, so episode 9 is mid-season premiere. You're correct. So the last one was the big
It's the
deal
fresh start.
because Jesus died. So
Yeah. So it is kind of notable that they end the mid-season finale in the graveyard, and then they start right there when they pick up
In the
8 weeks
graveyard.
later.
Yep. Adaptation, directed by Greg Nicotero, written by Corey Reed. And this is an interesting episode, definitely. There's a little bit of stuff that I feel like you can certainly predict, or at least I was able to predict the first time around, and then I was reminded when watching this time, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. But basically, there is definitely like an interesting thing, because the group they've got the body of Jesus, haha, and they're going to bring him back, and they escape the cemetery, but it's still, they're back on their heels because they don't really understand they now know that there are humans under the skins of the walkers, but it's a little tough to tell how many there are and who they are. Because they're pretty good masqueraders. So I did enjoy like the chase scene and what they do on the covered bridge. So they end up on a covered bridge, kind of cornered, but not really. And then Daryl like does the whole bow and arrow thing where he figures out who they are by shooting them in the legs. So I thought that was kind of a cool little trick.
Yeah, I mean, this was them going on the offense and cornering the. It was, if anything, it was pretty stupid of the Whisperers to have so few what they would call guardians with them, because it was almost even. It's like 3 people and 3 zombies, which I think they usually seem to go in bigger crowds.
Yep. But maybe they were caught off guard because they didn't expect people to fight back so well. I don't know. But in any case, they managed to capture one. I don't know. Like, this is Lydia that they capture, and she's just kind of a big liar, and I don't know, like, I don't know, like, you just kind of, it's still, to me, again, you and I talked about this last week, it's weird to me, like, if they are recruiting, how they are recruiting, if their immediate reaction is to just kill people.
Well, that's what she admits to in this episode.
Like, she's like, oh, we're just gonna kill you all.
We were always gonna kill you. And then it doesn't. Yeah, then I am confused then about how they have new people in the Whisperers ever. It's just bizarre. And also, if you look at just the scoreboard, I mean, we went through this with the Saviors. So yes, the Whisperers have successfully killed Jesus, who was that's a big deal. Mm-hmm. But there's like 6 or 7 dead Whisperers at this point too.
Right.
Like the scoreboard is definitely weighed in the favor of Hilltop and Alexandria and those guys. But I just never understand why the bad guys, the quote unquote bad guys, never seem fazed by their losses.
Right. And also, in like, the whole reason why they even got to Jesus is because they had the element of surprise. Like, and they didn't, the Hilltop and Alexandrians didn't understand what they were dealing with totally. So that was part of the issue. And, we've got, like, now that they know, that element is gone. So it's, a little, if that's all you got, then it seems kind of weird to me that you're not going to be fazed by the losses you took when you had that element of surprise on your side. So,
and this is just one of these artificial things that this show does, I think.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, after the Saviors lost like 50 or 60 people without any opportunity of fighting back against Rick's group, and when that conflict was first starting out, and you and I were keeping track of the scoreboard.
Yeah.
And sure, there were still a few hundred of them left, but they'd killed like 30% of the Saviors and lost almost no friendlies. Yep. Like, that has to have a psychological effect that I don't think the showrunners ever are successfully take into account.
Right.
So I would like to see more of that in the future. But in order to make these guys these terrifying big bads, they apparently have to have like no sense of morale, or at least they'll write it in that everybody's so scared of Alpha that they wouldn't possibly get scared or something,
As we said, this is it's a mechanism of the show, so I guess it's just one of those things we have to accept and move on.
Yeah, in a way.
But then, so we've got this group coming back to Hilltop to give them the body of Jesus. And I don't like, I think it's definitely what you would expect it to be. in terms of the reaction, because this has been their ad hoc leader, even though, or sorry, I shouldn't say ad hoc, because he's just the reluctant leader, basically, I guess. Did you find it interesting, Aaron's reaction now, where he's like, to Michonne, he's basically like, oh, now I understand what you're talking about, and that yet they still don't really discuss what they're talking about, like why there was a falling out between the two groups?
I did not understand that exchange.
Okay. So basically, he's just kind of like, oh, you're right, we should all keep to our own, but doesn't it feel more like wouldn't it inform them to do something else given
Now that there's an external threat?
right, and that the only reason they were able to kind of get all back together is because they were working together, right?
There's a funny scene in this episode also. Funny, like not an Easter egg, funny like a blooper, I would call it. There's a scene with Tara talking to Michonne and Daryl, I think, and she says something to them and then turns around and walks away, and she's walking around the corner of the manor house. And as she's about to go around the corner, she's looking at someone off camera who's behind the brick wall and gives them 2 thumbs up. Like, I nailed my scene, which was pretty funny to me.
It is pretty funny. It was weird that they left it in, don't you think?
Yeah, because in the next episode, they have gone back and retroactively removed the sound that got them fined. Remember we were talking about that?
Yep.
That sound is missing from that episode. So they clearly have the ability to go back. And I'm sure that part of the fine was probably like you have to go in and remove the noise or you'll get fined again. But yeah, it's funny that nobody noticed that during dailies.
So, but this is a bit of a transition of power. Tara's now the leader, and we see her taking charge, and so that's kind of interesting.
It's Tara Masters.
Yep.
No, not Tara. Alana Masters.
Alana Masters. And then we've also got Negan doing his stroll out. Like we see that continuation.
Yeah, it's an interesting little subplot with him and Judith is just so precocious. I don't know. Doesn't she feel invincible?
Yeah, but I mean, they have her, again, it sort of walks a line. I find her to be a little bit annoying, but, I guess if she's the daughter of Michonne, makes somewhat sense. But the funny thing is, it's sort of like, so Negan's out there, he's gathering stuff because he's going to take a trip over the wall, and you can kind of figure out what his plans are. He's really excited to eat like a tomato out of the garden or whatever. And then Judith catches him and threatens to shoot him, and
he creepily goes into her house too.
Yeah, he totally goes into her house. It's like kind of weird, and takes her compass, and like she basically says, all right, like it's actually it's a funny little exchange because she is very much like a parent figure here, which is like, it's a little different out there. You don't know what you're going to find. He's just kind of like, I won't hurt anybody and whatever. And she lets him go, but then says like, if I see you again, I'm going to shoot you. And then he's over the wall and off to visit his old stomping grounds. And I actually thought that he's like, Harry Dean Anderson is such a great actor. I feel like I just really like him.
Yeah, he's great.
And as Negan is in this, he has not been, the sanctuary is pretty much exactly what you would expect it to be. It's totally abandoned. It's kind of like trashed. It's almost like he's like, can I rebuild what I was before? It's almost like you can never go back home kind of a thing. And he's like trying to organize it in the way it was when he was there. It's just super depressing.
It's super. I mean, that's the idea, is that he's going to go back and see one guy he used to know as a zombie and try to like have a relationship with it. It's very strange. We also get to revisit our old friend Giardia.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I think there's a scene when he's throwing up after he drinks out of the river, and he's in the middle of this big clearing. And does it look familiar? I feel like that might be the clearing, or it might be supposed to look like the clearing where he had everybody kneeling, and of course he's kneeling, throwing up.
Yep, I think it is the clearing.
I think there's a good chance that was by design, and it definitely had me thinking like, whoa, okay, cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I did love his whole journey where he's like going into the menswear store to get a leather jacket, and then the dog, like it's like he just can't catch a break.
And neither
Um,
can packs of wild dogs,
I
honestly.
know, I know.
Why are there packs of wild dogs in this world? And because every time we see them, they're getting destroyed either
Right, like
by
how would they even survive?
was it
They also,
Sasha who mowed them all down with the machine gun in like season
yeah,
5,
yeah,
or they're just getting thrown to the zombies, or zombies are being thrown to them.
right, and I will say these are pretty healthy looking wild dogs. Just saying.
Yeah, they're well fed, like Australian shepherds. The big black one, I don't know what that
Yeah,
was,
like
like a
the pit bull thing,
sort
whatever
of
it was.
mix.
But anyway, like, so I did enjoy that journey, and he, it's so depressing. He's like doing his weird whistle, and that's like, just you can totally see where it's going, and where he's like, well, F this, I'm gonna go back. So I did enjoy that little interlude, and that was kind of a nice thing to break up some of the grief scenes and the stuff with all the stuff within the hilltop and the sort of dramatic stuff. I don't know, the one thing I feel like, so they're back at Hilltop, and then you've got Daryl, who had been sort of like so lost out there, suddenly is like now there and acting in sort of like a, I don't know, trusted, I mean, I guess he is, but like a trusted advisor kind of position, almost the way that Tara was being with Jesus.
Well, Hilltop is used to this with Jesus. Jesus had this role initially, right? As the
Right.
guy who like lives outside most of the time, but comes back and is then
Yeah.
their most trusted asset.
Yeah.
So
So
I think they're
he's
used to
and
that.
he's like kind of tasked with doing like the whole interrogation of Lydia. And as you remember, I hope, Henry's still down in the being like, tasked with drying out for a couple of days. And then it all turns out to be a big plot by Daryl to like listen outside to hear more stuff. Because Henry's playing the soft touch there with her.
I like the
Um,
writing. I like the dialogue in these scenes where he's talking to Lydia, and it goes on for both of these episodes that we're talking about today too. But
mhm.
the just it could be like the usual dumb teenage navel gazing BS, but it it's good because Lydia is actually trying to like hit him up for information, but
Mhm.
he's like so self obsessed that he kind of like ignores some of her intel questions. He does answer one eventually, and he gets in trouble with Daryl.
Yep.
Anyway, I like the way that was written. The fact that they can't see each other, they still seem to have a good conversation. They feel like they have chemistry between Cassidy McClincy
Mhm.
and Matthew Lintz.
I don't necessarily, I don't know. It was like kind of a funny good cop, bad cop, even though Henry doesn't necessarily know that he's the good cop,
Like
which
he
is kind of
doesn't even
funny.
realize. Yeah, that's good.
So that's kind of good. And then I like that it's like, then it's like flipping. There's the whole sort of revisitation between Judith and Negan when he comes back. And you know, I kind of liked that exchange between them. And so there's a lot of this in this particular episode between the older and the younger generation.
Mhm.
And who is going to play the wise old owl, so to speak. But in this, it's like there's like this whole thing between Judith and Negan when she recognizes that she was right, and she spares him, because I think, look, she's probably the closest with him out of anybody, right?
She
Um,
does seem to have more. Well, I mean, Gabriel has probably talked to him a lot, also.
yeah, but he's also trying to manipulate Gabriel, and I don't really feel like he does that with Judith as much anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, she's does a little bit of a "I told you so" routine, and they're like, I don't know. I kind of feel like if the Alexandria group saw like Negan walking in with Judith, I don't know that they're necessarily going to get in with no issue. What do you think?
It's definitely going to be weird. Also, it's weird that she's out there by herself.
Right.
She can't be older than, I don't know, 12.
Right.
If that's no, that can't be right. She must be 6 or 7, or maybe 8 at most, based
Yeah.
on the amount of time that's passed. It's bananas that she's out there by herself.
Yeah. But I think it's sort of, I mean, to me, it was always like they're trying to make her almost Carl why is Carl never in the house? Well, in this case, she's never in the house, but she knows what she's doing, kind of a
Because she's a
thing, which
creature
is
of the woods.
right. In a
And then
way,
we also this episode ends with a scene. Alden and Luke have gone out together, and so they follow a trail of Yumiko's arrows
yep,
to basically to Alpha, who ends the episode by introducing herself, sort of,
yep.
and just saying trail ends here. And then we know we're in for a ride.
And
Introduces what's her name? What's Alpha's name?
oh, that's
Samantha Morton.
yeah, and I mean, look, she's got she has had a pretty busy career in the last few years because she was in it was like it's a Hulu show about prostitutes where she plays like the madam.
Damn.
So she's been, and I mean, she was a pretty significant role in that.
Harlots.
Harlots, yeah.
It's like it might even still be on.
Really, I feel like she maybe left the show to be on this, or vice versa. I don't really remember, but I just remember because Samantha Morton was in. She's been in she did a lot of like independent films, and then like kind of, but has always kind of made her own way, like not in the traditional sense, but she does a really good job at playing like these morally ambiguous characters. So as an actor, I think she's excellent. So she's
got a lot of awards. I mean, not like Oscars, not American ones mostly, but so many from so many different film festivals or like national awards ceremonies. She's got a Golden Globe.
I saw her first in I think it might have been it was with Sean Penn. Trying to remember the name of the film, but in any case, that was the first time I saw her, and it was a Woody Allen film. It was Sweet and Low Down. And that was in '99, and then she got nominations for all the awards, like Academy Award, Golden Globe, all that kind of thing. So I feel like that's the first time I saw her, though I think she had been in a ton of other things, like BBC things. Before that,
she was one of the psychics in Minority Report.
Yeah, but it was hard to tell who she was because they were weird psychics.
Wasn't she bald and floating around in that show? I mean,
and she was in the Harry Potter world. So yeah, I think like she's excellent. So I was psyched to see her in this. But in any case, she's a good alpha leader. I think she's terrifying. So.
Yeah. Well, we only see her with her mask on in this episode. Right. And although I feel like the promotional materials for the season had already shown her face, right?
I think they had, and there was stuff around, which is like I knew going into the season that she was going to be in it, and I also saw like a press release that she was going to be in it, so I was pretty excited about that. Yeah. I don't know. I thought that was like a nice. I did feel like it was a little bit much that Alden and Luke would have been taken in, because there was definitely a feeling like something was really wrong there. And given that they know that there's something wrong happening out there, I feel like I don't know that they would have gone off as just two people to pursue. Yeah. So I found a little bit unbelievable, but I guess they had to make it sort of like a schemy thing. I don't know.
Yeah. They just, I guess they're trying to say that Hilltoppers didn't know what was going on, and they just kept sending out new groups of people.
Yeah, I guess so.
I don't know why they would keep doing that either, because it's like they said, what is kind of tricky to follow in this season so far is the passage of time.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it's been probably 2 or 3 days for the whole season. But it feels like longer because every so often we go off and do a side story like Henry getting drunk, and that's overnight, and then he's in jail, and we don't know exactly how long it's been. Yeah. But was he in jail for just one day? Eugene was out in that barn for one night, but that's also been like 4 episodes now.
Yeah.
And so that morning that they're coming back to Hilltop, they're coming from the cemetery. They've all been up all night, but it's a little bit difficult to really judge the passage of time. But that's why it also feels a little bit silly that Hilltop wouldn't know more, because we've been watching the show over the course of one night in the the storytelling, but it's taken months to unfold on TV. So it's a little bit weird.
Yeah. Um, so in this one, we've got the continued sort of rapport between Henry and Lydia. For this is appropriately named Omega, directed by David Boyd, written by Channing Powell. And this is the part where Henry gets in trouble from Daryl for telling Lydia too much. But in some of it's clear to me that she's trying to get information from him. But in part, Henry's able to develop a rapport with her, I think, because he's revealing a little bit, and also she thinks he's stupid.
I really enjoyed a lot of these flashbacks too in this episode.
The flashbacks are
even
pretty
though
brutal.
They're interesting because they turn out to be untrustworthy. Like, these are supposedly from Lydia's memory, but then she realizes as the episode goes on that she's remembering things differently. And so I really enjoyed the fact that they kind of play that out over the course of this episode, is who's the good parent, who's the bad parent, and what's happening. And it's also very rare that we get to go back and see right after the outbreak begins.
Right. And
in this case, it's one of my favorite parts of the zombie apocalypse to look at stories is that period of time. And so I like going there and seeing what's going on.
Right. And I also like that, when taken from the perspective of a kid going through this, like she was young, and the trauma and what that can do to somebody's memories, I think that was kind of interesting. And in this case, like, they're totally in the cellar of this place. Just the only information they have is really coming from emergency broadcasts and whatever. And her memory is really skewed. Like, so I think this was an interesting take on stuff and an interesting way to portray it, because it's just totally the the narrator's definitely got something up with them, right? So and you're like, the untrusty. You're not going to trust this narrator with everything, but you don't learn that until later, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of like that. I always like the flashbacks, and it's kind of cool to get flashbacks from like a totally different perspective. I think they're in Baltimore.
That's what they say on the radio, yeah.
And she's got a lot of flashbacks that sort of paint a specific narrative. So, like, she's got her dad who's like, but she's got like a limited sense of what is happening out there. And, you could see that adults telling a kid like the things that they want to hear, very similar to like what would be happening when they initially are trying to, like, even though Carl and some of the other kids had seen so many different things, now it's obviously very different, but initially you could see people trying to protect them and telling them little white lies in order to make them not panic. So in her case, she's like hoping a doctor's going to come to make everybody better and that kind of thing.
And that's clearly something that her parents have been telling her.
Right, yeah. Right. And we see, the whole, we see stuff with her mom, and obviously they do the reveal of the tattoo. And, I don't know. And then there's the whole flashback of her dad's death, once Henry like asks her about that. But you don't necessarily get a context of that. She just like says, "Oh, he was stupid," or something like that. But I will say this. I don't blame Daryl for getting pissed at Henry for he reveals a ton really quickly, and Henry knows better. Do you think Henry would do this?
Like we keep saying, why Henry keeps disappointing us. HA, we should stop being so vulnerable to Henry.
I guess, but like he really just like he reveals so much about the structure. He reveals a lot about both Hilltop and Alexandria,
and the kingdom.
And so it's sort of like, if she's there for reconnaissance, which she very well may be, or she's been put into the role of like sort of, maybe unwilling reconnaissance. I mean, that's like her goal here, and you can even see it, I think, on her face. So, but
she admits it later. She's like, the only reason my mom would take me back is if I have something to offer her. Right. And so she knows that's just that's ammunition that she needs. And what did you think of the nighttime field trip? Do you think that was planned? Like Daryl told him to do that? Or do you think he was doing that completely independently?
I thought maybe Daryl told him to do that.
mean, he's certainly there watching,
Right. And
but
I
I
feel
don't know.
like
He comes pretty close to getting brained with a hammer, and unless Daryl was super quick with the nighttime crossbow, that would have been really hard to prevent, as close as they were.
yeah, but maybe he didn't know that. I don't know. It felt like it was like, to me it felt like it was planned, or I was hoping it was planned anyway, because maybe it's because I don't want to think that
You don't
Henry's
want to be
that
even more
stupid.
disappointed. You don't want to be even
Yes.
more disappointed in Henry. That's what I'm telling you. I'm telling you, we
Yeah.
can't have too high hopes for him because he does seem overly optimistic, and he's got that youthful willingness to trust. Whereas Lydia's like an alien. She's eating worms and licking them for him, and then I mean, to his credit, he eats a worm too.
Yeah, he does. So that's why I don't know. Maybe he just really likes her. I don't know. The worm scene was like, I was just sort of like, teenage hormones.
That make you
He's
do anything.
doing whatever he can do, to like, to get on her good side.
So the new
Um,
kids head out to find Luke, who's been missing now, and there's more of this character development of this team, of this group, and it's good. I mean, part of me did start to wonder. No, I won't go there. That's a season 10 spoiler. But they showed up around the same time as the new big bads. I'll just leave it at that. But we do keep getting these scenes of them developing these characters, and they continue to be kind of badasses everywhere they go. They're just slaying bodies and being like good trackers and communicating, and so it's kind of cool.
this is kind of a cool scene because they do build up like the big bad in this. You also can't necessarily. It's kind of interesting because they do draw like some parallels between the story of Lydia's mama and Carol, with the
Mm-hmm.
hair and the beard
Mm-hmm.
and all that stuff.
Beard.
Well, because remember, like with Lydia's dad, he's kind of like, oh well, the world's ending, so I'm just gonna do whatever I want. So he keeps like growing that beard, and then she's like, well, the world's ending, and she's like totally shaved her head and whatever, and then Henry has that whole story that he shares with Daryl about Carol's hair.
Yeah.
And so you can definitely, it's sort of like like it's an interesting idea, just depending on things, how things have happened, what people do to survive. We have seen Carol do some crazy stuff, like even in this season with like destroying the whatever that weird outpost of sanctuary folks. She's still badass Carol, but she's grown her hair out.
They're setting these two women up to
Yeah,
be
clearly.
these, antitheses, or maybe they're too similar, but they're definitely going to go head to head based on some of these jail cell confessions that we're getting in this episode.
If you look at the story of Henry, of Lydia, of Daryl, of Carol, of Mama, they all have like this. Daryl, you see his connection with Lydia despite himself, and you could argue that some of this is just him trying to make her trust him, but Daryl always has like a soft spot for somebody who's been abused. You see it in the way that he sees that her arm is bruised. You see it in the way that he is interacting with her. And like these are survivors, and so there's like a sort of grudging respect, I think you'd have to have, or at least some empathy if you'd also been through that. And it's interesting to see just the different paths that people take despite the fact that they may have similar origin stories. So I kind of enjoyed some of those backstories and character development that they did here, because it definitely informs things as later on, and some of that is the head-to-head between Carol and Mama.
So, well, the episode kind of ends, not to jump to the end, but I feel like a lot of this is the flashbacks, the back and forth between Daryl and Lydia, and Henry and Lydia, with her becoming. She has this like weird breakdown when she hears a baby crying, which I'm also a little bit curious about, because there is a baby that we meet later on in this season who is part of her community.
Mm-hmm.
And so every time she hears a baby cry, she can't just go into weird flashbacks, but maybe it's because of all this like soul bearing she's been doing that this baby crying makes her freak out and go, oh, I was about to murder you, but now I realize that my daddy was the good guy and my mommy's the bad lady.
Right.
So please put me back in jail.
Right.
Okay. Sure. That's fine. Whatever. But by the end of this episode, We have the new guys, the new kids on the block are coming back inside. They're getting chastised by Tara for sneaking out. But on their just as they're walking back, and Connie's like way behind everybody else, it seems a little bit like a liability.
Yep.
And then suddenly these, the Whisperers show up, walking up, not pretending to be anything, and Alpha doesn't even have her hat on.
Nope.
And that's when we see Samantha Morton's face for realsies. Well, yep. I guess not not outside of a flashback, I guess.
Right, and it turns out Mama is Alpha. Da-da.
Ta-da.
That accent, she wants her dada. Like,
she's English. I mean, I'm sure it's like probably textbook a good accent, but I don't know. I'm actually really happy that Yumiko just has her Australian accent for once. Yep. Like, let's stop trying to make all these foreigners try to speak with American accents. It's painful.
So she's demanding that they hand over Lydia, and you can definitely see there's a struggle. Like, Daryl is sort of like, I'm not going to hand over abused kid to her abusive parent. You know, like so there's all this weird, twisted, strange strings tying them together, which play out definitely in this season. So again, I'm still enjoying I enjoy the season so much more. Like, this isn't a slog to get through. It definitely is one of those things where I have to be careful and not go forward. It's been a while since I've watched this season, but I'm enjoying it. Or there's been a healthy, I think when we've rewatched other things, maybe I was a little closer to it somehow.
The whole Savior's arc was really difficult to watch.
Yeah, because it felt slog. So it was like a slog to get through it once. Again, like when we were rewatching it, this doesn't feel that way, and it still doesn't. So that's like kind of cool.
It might not be 100%, but it's the new showrunner has made a huge difference.
Right.
Even though it's a lot of the same writers and same directors, same cast, it's crazy how much difference this overall arcing direction can make.
Well, and I think part of it is that you do believe these relationships, and the time is taken to do the character building. And again, like, this is a massive number of people to do character building with, but True. You can even see in this, we get some character building with Lydia, with Henry, with Alpha, or at least we get some background with that. We definitely see Daryl going back to his roots, and that plays back to the beginning of the series. Just
totally,
as we've seen Daryl reveal things about his past.
Yeah, with Beth, and that's well trodden ground, actually. Yeah, like his messed up history. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you also, in addition to that, we get to see the new group, how they're interacting with Hilltop. That their dedication to each other trumps their safety at Hilltop. Like, they know that they're not supposed to. Tara's like very clear about the fact that they're not supposed to go out there. But you could also see, like, if you switched groups around, you could see that Rick and his group would have gone out to get Michonne, or Michonne would have gone out to get Daryl, or whatever it is. Yeah. If the tables were turned.
And then one of them would say, "We'll keep our weapons and we'll take this place."
Right. Because, you could totally see it.
You remember when that would happen a fair amount, actually.
Yes, it would. But I like how intricate the stories are, and it doesn't feel as ham-handed as things did with the survivors, the Sanctuary folks. That whole storyline was like, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about this, yeah. And I think we'll have to save the rest for how the next couple episodes play out.
Yeah, I'm happy to be at this point in the story, and I know that there's some crazy stuff coming up in this season too. So
yep.
Kind of, and not in a way that I'm like, dreading having to watch it. It's
exciting.
There's some good stuff coming up. So yeah, we'll get back together again soon and continue our recaps of The Walking Dead season 9. And if you need to get a hold of us in a way that you will not catch a cold from me, you can send us an email at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. Twitter is reanimatedpcast. Website is reanimatedpodcast.com.
Well done. And until next time, thanks for listening, and ciao.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.